Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name's Mike, and I'm the programs director here at Africa Fire Mission. So happy you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's virtual training. Today, I'm going to be taking you through a topic where we've been covering bushfires all month. Today, we're going to take a focus on tools that you can use and techniques to maintain those tools and to use those tools. Uh, Before we get started with today's training, I'm going to pass things over to Jose Najiri. He is Africa Fire Mission's Fire Safety Officer. He's going to get us started with a few words of encouragement.
Thank you so much, Chief Mike. I truly appreciate you and everybody else for actually coming through for today. Remember, your investment of self needs sacrifice. In fact, today I want to take a moment to appreciate each of you for the incredible work that you do. As Mike has said, today is going to talk about bushfires. Just to encourage you, bushfire is not just a job, or firefighting is not just a job. It's a calling, a sacrifice, and a commitment to protecting lives, property, and of course, the nature itself. You know what? Your courage, your resilience is we see your resilience, and also your safety is paramount. So even as you use your tools, try and think about the tools that are common to you. Don't go like these tools we don't have and we cannot get to use, you know? So you need to have your tools always ready for you. And also mentally, you need to be ready. You stay sharp, you stay safe, and don't underestimate the impact of your work. Every fire you prevent, every person you protect, and every lesson you share makes a difference. So keep learning, keep adopting, and most importantly, keep looking out for each other. Stay safe and stay well. Back to you, Chief Mike.
Alrighty, thank you, Jose. We always appreciate you. Those words of encouragement that you share with us, and also all the work that you do to help support firefighters, not only in Kenya, but throughout all of Africa. So thanks for that, Jose. Before we get started in today's training, just want to cover a couple of administrative items. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, we can get you a certificate of participation for today's training. If you get cut off, don't have enough bundles, can't make it through, that's not a problem. There's still ways that you can get a certificate of participation for this class. If you go to our webpage, www.africafire.mission.org, go to the resources tab under training materials, all sorts of great free resources and information there. There's a place you can click for the 2025 virtual trainings. It's going to take you to our Google Drive folder. In there, you'll find all the classes that we've done so far this year, a video recording, answer a few questions to let us know that you watched that whole training session, and I'll get you a certificate of participation for any of those as well. So, encourage you to check that out. There's lots of other great information on that page. It's all free resources for fire prevention trainings, fire safety assessments, all sorts of great stuff. So please check that out and see if there's anything there that may interest you. We'll also record this session. It'll be posted. It'll premiere on YouTube Friday morning at 8 a.m. So encourage you all to find us on YouTube, Africa Fire Mission. Click that subscribe button. You'll get notified anytime we put up new content. That would really help us out as well. So I ask if you haven't done that yet, please go ahead and do that for us as well. When we get finished here with today's training at the top of the hour, we're going to transition into our tea time. I'm going to pass things back over to Jose. Tea time is a time where you can ask questions about today's class. You can network with other firefighters throughout Africa. Jose sometimes has secret guests that he surprises me with, that we have extra bonus content and conversations. So please, if you've got the time in the bundles, stick around after we get finished at the top of the hour. With that, I'm going to start into our program for today and get started. As I mentioned before, we're going to take a look at bushfire tools. Um, if at any point while we're going through this you've got a question, um, please drop it in the chat. We've got you all muted at the moment, so we get a nice clean recording of this. But we'll open things up for questions uh, at the end of it. All right. So we're looking at bushfire tools today, um, different ways you can maintain them, techniques. This is coming right from some very official training that we do here in the U.S. Through the National Wildland Coordinating Group. It's one of the chapters of our current training, and then we've just adopted it to make it a little bit more appropriate for firefighters in Africa. Okay, so some of my terminology, I try to keep it pretty local. If you've got questions about what I'm saying, be sure to ask. Um, Also, the names of some of these tools may be different than what you're used to. Don't get wrapped up on what they're called. Look at look at them, look at the shape of them, look at how they're used, and see what you can find locally. What are we going to learn today? We'll identify some of these common tools that are used, at least here in the US. Um, we'll talk about picking the right tool. Performing maintenance, field maintenance on them is really one of the topics we'll talk about a lot. We'll mention how to carry or pass the tools around. Um, we won't we'll try to talk about the that proper tool use. Of course I can't really demonstrate them in an online class, but we'll hopefully talk our way through that a little bit and talk about storing the tools when we're not using them. We'll get started taking a look at cutting tools. um, One of the things that I'll start off by saying is that most of the tools that we use for bushfire are agricultural tools. They're some form of an agricultural tool that's adapted to use for fire. Um, when you go to purchase these tools, if you're purchasing them as a fire tool, they're going to cost a lot more money than if you were purchasing them as an agricultural tool. So, um, I would encourage you, as we always do, what's that locally available resource that is similar to these tools that you can use and adapt for your environment and for the types of fires that you're seeing. Um, so we've got cutting tools. These cutting tools we're using to cut the vegetation, right? Shrubs, small bushes, um, anything that's growing, sort of on the surface, on the ground, we're going to cut them away. Our intention here with bushfire suppression is not necessarily to put water on the fire, right? Real quick review, right? We've got the fire triangle: fuel, oxygen, and heat. When they combine, they make fire. Uh, we need to remove one of those legs of that fire triangle. Uh, so with bushfire, or with a building fire, typically we're removing that the heat leg by putting water from the fire hose from the fire tender on the fire, cooling it. That's what makes the fire go out. When we're dealing with bushfire, we're probably working in an area where water's not readily available. The volume of fire is such that if we start spraying water around from the fire appliance, we're going to run out pretty quickly. Um, so for bushfire, what we're looking at doing is removing the fuel from the fire. So we talked about this last week, the week before, where you might go ahead of where the fire's burning and remove a strip of that vegetation building off of a road or something to let the fire burn up to that, and then when the fuel's out, that stops the fire, right? So we're using these cutting tools to remove those fuels from the ground so that the fire cannot continue to spread. The first tool that we have here, we call this thing a Pulaski. Uh, Essentially, what this is it's like an axe. Um, it's on one side it's got your cutting edge. On the other side, it's got what we call a grubbing end. We use the term grubbing to mean that we're scraping in the dirt, cutting out roots and vegetation that's under the surface. Okay, so you've got the head of the tool. That's the whole top piece. Obviously, you've got the handle. The handle can be made out of wood. It can be made out of like a fiberglass material or something like that. Um, the shoulder of the tool is up here at the top. The butt is at the end of the handle. Uh, we've got the cutting edge is the sharpened part. The axe part, the grubbing edge is the bottom part that we're going to use for digging or scraping. The eye, all of these tools that we have um, on a handle have what we call an eye. Okay, so the eye of the tool is the part of that metal head where the handle inserts into it, and to keep that handle tight, uh, on that head, you drive a wedge into the handle, and that wedge spreads the top of that handle apart, and that's what holds the metal head tight to the wooden handle. The metal part that it goes through is what we call the eye of the tool. And the sort of important thing to know about that is that as you use that tool, if you're striking with that tool, that eye can become deformed. So that hole that the handle goes through can change shape. And when that changes shape, that loosens the head of the tool. So how do we fix that? Well, that's where you use a wooden wedge or a metal wedge and drive that down into the wood. So the top of this handle, and you could carve your own handle out of a piece of wood that's locally available. You could buy a handle, but that handle's going to have a cut in the top of it, right? In the top where it slides on, there's going to be a cut down through the center of that. And that's where you drive that wedge to spread the wood out at the top of the handle and make the head tight on there. So for all of these tools that are mounted on a handle, that's how we're going to tighten up that head, by adding more wedges to get that head tight. That's really important, because if that's loose and you're swinging this tool and that head flies off, um, that can be dangerous, right? Uh, so how do we use this particular tool? The Pulaski, the cutting edge is just like a single bit axe that you might use, on your structure engine or whatever, where you can chop, cut with the sharp edge, and then instead of having that flat striking edge on it, it's got this grubbing edge that has it's fairly blunt, but you are going to sharpen it a little bit so that it can cut through roots and things like that down in the ground. How do we maintain this? All of our tools, every tool that we use, we're going to sharpen that tool. We're going to sharpen all the edges on that tool. We're going to use a file, just a flat file. I should have grabbed one out of my toolbox. I have a ruler. So you're going to take like a ruler, a flat file like this ruler. If my hand is the tool edge, you're going to use the file to sharpen that edge. So um, our distances here, we say 2.5 inches. So there we're talking about 6-7 centimeters, something like that. nice 45-degree angle on that grubbing edge, um, sort of a blunt edge on that. On the cutting edge, the axe side, we want that nice and sharp. If you don't have a metal file to do that, of course you can use a sharpening stone or anything. I'm sure you guys have ways that you sharpen your tools, right? So whatever you would normally use to sharpen that. Ideally, it'd be good to keep those to use some kind of a sheath to cover those sharp edges when the tool's being stored. So if there's something that's available like that, or you can make something to cover those sharpened edges, that would be really appropriate. How do we use this tool? Athletic stance, feet sort of shoulder width apart. You're swinging that tool from about shoulder height down between your legs, being careful that you don't hit your feet, don't chop your toes off, using that for digging and grubbing down in the dirt. So that's the Pulaski. Um, Another tool, um, this we call an adze. There's different versions of it. A hazel hoe, just a hoe. This is a real common agricultural tool, right? Used in cultivation to overturn the soil before you plant your seeds in it, right? So same thing, it's going to be mounted on a wooden handle. Um, this could be made at some sort of metal edge. So you've got your tool head. It has an eye that you insert that handle into. It may be held on with wedges or pins, depending on how it's designed. And it's got that grubbing edge. So what do we use that for? Again, we're going to sharpen it with a bit of a wider bevel to it, 45-degree angle. Um, we don't want this thing to be razor sharp because it'll just dull right away, but we're using this to scrape away vegetation, to chop at like the roots of a grass like vegetation, cutting brush. You can swing that to take limbs, lower limbs off of a tree or something like that. So, uh, you know, digging tool. So very, very effective removing that vegetation. Again, we're trying to get the vegetation out and away. We're digging in the dirt some so that there's no roots or anything. We're going to call that. We're trying to get down to what we call bare mineral soil. So there's no organic material in that soil that can burn when the fire comes up to it. With our cutting tools, um, how do we take care of these things? How do we maintain these things? Um, Inspect the handle for cracks, for gouges, for some kind of wear in that handle. Um, Look for any damage or deformities to that metal head, cracks in the metal head that may indicate that the tool's going to break at some point in time soon. Uh, you'll want to sand that handle down or smooth that handle down somehow so you're not getting splinters in the hand, whether that's using a sandpaper or it's using a knife blade to scrape down on that handle uh, to make sure that's nice and smooth. Of course, we're going to be wearing gloves when we're doing this maintenance and when we're using these tools, hopefully. Keep the cutting edges nice and sharp. Uh, a thin coating of some type of oil or something like that um, would be uh, would be appropriate to keep the metal tool heads from rusting. One of the things that you've got to figure out is when you're doing your tool inspection, what happens if the tool needs to be taken out of service, right? There's something wrong with it. It needs repair, it needs replacement. How do you go about doing that? Um, for us here, we keep a chalkboard. There's a chalkboard in the station. If a piece of equipment goes out of service, there's a section on the chalkboard where you write that down. You need to report it to somebody that's responsible for fixing those things, or that has the ability to go and procure a new one, to purchase a new one. So, um, you know, work out some sort of a system. What are we going to do if the tool is damaged or needs replaced? When do you do maintenance on these tools? You should be checking every tool that you have at the start of every shift. Um, Maintain them if you find them not functioning properly. And then we also do this out in the field. These guys in this picture are sitting out on a fire, working on a fire, and every time they take a break, they're pulling a metal file out of their pack that they carry with them, and they're sharpening those tools every time they sit down and take a rest. So it just shows you sort of the value or the importance of keeping your tools nice and sharp. Next category of tool we want to talk about are scraping tools, and they're sort of similar to what we defined as cutting tools um, in the previous section there. We're using the scraping tools for fire line construction. We're also using them in mop up. Mop up is that term. It's post fire, right? We've got the fire out. We've got to make sure that the fire stays out. So, how do we make sure the fire stays out? We've got to make sure we remove all the heat from the fire. Using these scraping tools, we can do that. We can pull hot embers and mix them with the soil and keep stirring that up mixed with the soil. Sometimes we could put a little bit of water in there, mix that up, make sure it's cool. Then we're going to check it with the back of our hand for heat. Um, so that's what we're using these scraping tools for in mop up, or we're using them again to remove that vegetation away from the fire to try to stop the fire. All of our tools have a sharp edge. Always be cautious when you're using any tool with a sharp edge that you don't cut yourself on it. Some of these tools, when you purchase them, they may come with a sheath. If they don't, can you make something to protect those cutting edges or those sharpened edges when you're not using it? Um, Again, with any tool, to be proficient at using these tools, you've got to practice with them. Um, this is an easy drill to practice cutting fire line, is to grab your hand tools and go find an open area with some vegetation that obviously is not being used for agriculture or something. Practice swinging these tools. How quickly and proficiently can you cut and remove vegetation? Maybe that's something that you can coordinate with the local city council if they've got a little bit of an area that needs cleared for a public project or something like that, to take the guys out from the fire brigade and cut some vegetation away, practicing that while doing something that might benefit the city. Hey, that might be really beneficial, help elevate your status with city council and things like that. Something to think about, something to look at. A scraping tool that maybe folks, excuse me, I know here in the US, some of our fire brigades don't really think about using a shovel as a firefighting tool. It's really effective though. They sell a very specific fire shovel, and a fire shovel, the angle of the head of that shovel is a little bit different than the angle of a shovel if you were going to use it just for regular digging. And of course, then because they changed that angle just a little bit, they call it a fire shovel. They charge way more for it. Uh, we don't use official fire shovels. We just get the guy in this picture. He's holding what we would call a spade shovel. Not sure if you guys would call it the same thing, but you see the shape of the head of that shovel. it's got the same, it's got the same characteristics. and terminology is all of our other cutting tools, right? The blade is this, the big digging part. It's got a handle that slides down into sort of a metal tube, right? It's held in place with rivets or pins. Um, we're going to sharpen the edge of that shovel. Um, uh, a fire shovel isn't used all the time for digging, but with that sharpened edge, you can use that as a cutting tool. You can swing that shovel and uh, and remove vegetation, cut down grassy vegetation and things like that. Um, my son is a runner. He competes. He does competitive distance running, right? So they were preparing their we call it cross country track meet, and they were cleaning up the trail. And I had a shovel because I was filling in some holes for them. And we got to a section of the trail they were going to run on that was too narrow, and oh well, we need someone to bring a lawnmower, or we need somebody to bring something in here to cut all this vegetation down so we can widen the running trail here. I had that shovel in my hand, and I start swinging that thing at the base of this, weeds, grass-like stuff. Cut it right down, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy, right? I used this shovel to cut the grass, cut this vegetation. They'd never thought of it before. Super easy to do, right? Um, Works well, and that shovel didn't even have a sharpened edge like we would keep our fire tool. So, sharpen that edge up, um, file sort of away from the tip of it with your file there. Get that edge nice and sharp. You can use that to cut vegetation. You can use it to dig a trench if you're on a hillside and rolling embers are coming down the hill. You cut a trench to catch those so that it doesn't spread the fire. Um, you can use it just to pick up dirt or sand and throw dirt or sand onto the fire, right? When we're out doing community fire prevention, we're talking about using dirt or sand as a method of fire suppression, right? The shovel, perfect tool for that. If you're in a dry area with a bushfire, tossing using that shovel to throw dirt on the fire, very effective. So fire shovel, great tool. Take a look at this tool. This tool is going to be difficult for you to acquire. They call it a McLeod. Um, so one side is like a really wide metal hoe, digging, scraping, grubbing tool. The other side has long, sort of heavy tines or teeth or fingers on it, whatever you want to call those. Um, it's handy. It's very easy to use. We use that a lot in the type of vegetation that we have here. Sharpened up, you can use the flat side to cut. You can use the other side to pull the vegetation away with sort of the teeth there. The thing I like about this, if you think this tool might be effective, um, this would be easy to make. A flat piece of metal, cut it in that shape, and then use some sort of a piece of pipe or something to attach it to a handle. I think this is something that you could make locally. Care and maintenance for this is the same as all of them, right? That we've been talking about. You see this over and over again. I'm going to make this presentation available to you guys as a PDF. It's going to be in that folder that I was talking about. You can find on our resources webpage. I just dropped into the chat a link to it as well. I don't have it there right now, but within a couple hours of me wrapping this up, after I get done processing your certificates and things, I'll drop that in there for you guys to find. Okay. So that's the McLeod tool, whatever you want to call it. Maybe you can make something like that. uh, this tool here, I'm from Pennsylvania, here in the U.S. This is the council rake, the council tool, the rich rake. It goes by a bunch of different names. This is the most common tool that we use in the U.S. in the eastern woodlands. Um, It is, it's a raking tool. It's got those teeth on there. Um, those teeth come from what we call a sickle bar, from a mechanical farming tool, right? So a sickle bar, you attach it to a tractor and it has those big teeth on it. The bar sort of sticks out to the side and it's used to cut down. You'd use it for like harvesting wheat or cutting down lots of vegetation. I don't know if that's a tool that's available, but we can take those teeth from that tool and make this tool very easily. Um, so you've got these triangular teeth. They're all sharpened on a piece of angle iron, little piece of pipe, attach it to the handle. And this, because they're sharp, cuts vegetation, cuts the limbs off of trees, cuts through bushes and shrubs, digs down into the dirt, cuts through roots, pulls all that loose vegetation away from the fire line. Really handy tool. My favorite tool to grab when I'm doing bushfire, if I don't have a leaf blower available to me, right? Because that in our eastern woodlands is the most effective tool. But we're not really talking about power tools today. So how do you maintain it? Same thing. It's got a handle, an eye, a shank, blah, blah, blah. You got that right. We're sharpening it the same way, using that file, keeping everything nice and sharp. And those teeth are replaceable too. You can drill out the rivets, replace those teeth as needed. In our formal training here, we call these alternative tools, these next couple tools. This one is the fire swatter. Um, we use this in what we call light flashy fuels, right? Low fire intensity, fire burning in thin grasses and things like that. This tool is pretty commonly misused because of the name of it. It's called a fire swatter. So, it's just a hunk of rubber, and I'm going to show you how to make one of these tools here in a little bit. But it's called a swatter. It's a hunk of rubber attached to a stick. The way this tool gets misused is that it's used to swat at the fire, to hit the fire, to beat the fire out. I've heard these called a fire beater when I'm working in Africa. This tool is more effective to drag it along the ground and use it to smother the fire, to slowly drag it across the ground. If you're going to use it to swat or to beat at the fire, it's not swinging it from over the shoulder down, because that's moving a lot of air, producing a little bit of a wind. It's flaming the fire. So if you're going to use it to beat or swat the fire, you're using it, uh, uh, right off the ground. Just a short little motion, slap, 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 not big motion to beat the fire. Um, I hope that makes sense. Drag it along the fire to smother it out, or a beating motion that's very close to it, just bup, 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 bup. Um, Maintain it like all your other tools. Just be cautious that rubber material that it's made out of. You're putting it in direct contact with the fire to smother it, but just be aware, if you keep it on something that's really hot for too long, right, it's gonna melt. So, um, be cautious how you use it like that. Um, Another alternate tool that can work really well is a rake. Um, Inexpensive. They come in a bunch of different styles. This picture down here on the bottom, this guy, we call this like a shrub rake. Uh, it's cut off. Its handle is the whole tool comes up to maybe your knee, right? It's small enough to put into a bag or something like that. So you can just, sort of swipe away with it. You've got full size ones. They make this guy here in the middle. He's got the rake that he's using is a collapsible rake that the tines all sort of come together and make it more compact. The handle is extendable. Um, I've seen rakes all over Africa, right? These aren't that expensive, readily available. Great tool for removing that vegetation. They don't have a cutting edge on them, so in your fire line, right? Maybe one guy's coming through and cutting the vegetation down, and then the guy with the rake is coming along behind and and scraping those away from the fire line, right? As we're scraping those materials away, we're scraping them away from the fire. If they're unburnt, if we're moving burnt material, we're scraping them towards the fire. Interestingly, it says this tool's become increasingly common. It wasn't something that we used a lot, but we're sort of realizing, man, this is pretty handy. Pretty handy tool to use. Specialty tools, just you can see the shapes of these things. uh they come in different names. They're usually named from the manufacturer or something like this. um this guy's got what we call a wedge pounder. That typically goes with our sawyers, or the guys that are running chainsaws. It's got a hammer edge on one side and a digging, grubbing hoe like edge on the other side. Um, this pick hoe, has a smaller, sharpened edge for some, you know, deeper, more precise digging, and a wider, you know, grubbing edge on the other side. Uh, this tool over here on this side is sort of like a flathead shovel that's bent down 90 degrees, and can be sharpened up and used for scraping and things. It has a head on it that you can change the configuration of it, so it's got a little twisting mechanism that you untwist, and then you could bend that tip out straight, or down at 90 degrees, or fold it back onto itself. Uh, they're just for your own sort of awareness. Those tools are out there and available. Kind of expensive, kind of specialized, right? Other tools, over here we've got this Rhino tool. Just want you to kind of see the shape of it as you're thinking about what kind of tools can I find. This gal in the center, the Super Pulaski. It's the same as that Pulaski that I showed you in the beginning, but the grubbing edge is much wider here. The troop tool has a collapsible handle. Whatever, right? Just different tools. Look at the shapes, get some ideas. um, this guy was also using a drip torch, which we won't touch on here today, but that's a whole different technique of using fire to help you in your suppression efforts. This one's interesting. In our training, we teach this as we call it a historical tool. Uh, but this is a great option. Um, it's a gunny sack, we call it, or a burlap sack. So burlap is a sort of a natural fiber material. It's woven together. Um, and before plastics were common, this is the material that your feed bags and your grain bags are made out of, right? So, nowadays a lot of your grain, if you're buying a large quantity of grain, it's typically coming in like a woven plastic bag. But burlap is this material that's made out of like a natural fiber. Um, if you could find that, that is an effective way of extinguishing the fire. You're going to use it like a smothering tool. You're going to use it kind of similar to the fire beater or the fire swatter. Um, you wet it down, wet it down. Sometimes they'll stick like a tree branches inside of it to widen it out so that it's so you get sort of that wider surface area. Keep it damp and then use that to drag along the edge of the fire or to beat out the fire. Um, some of our smoke jumpers still carry these and use these in particular areas of the US because it's very lightweight. It's easy to put in the pack. Our smoke jumpers are the guys that jump out of the airplanes and we drop them out of the airplanes, sort of skydiving down into a remote area to fight a fire. There's not a whole lot of maintenance to these things. Keep them moist, keep them damp, so that the fire doesn't burn through them. Um, and the last comment there, you guys aren't really gonna may not find in some of our areas, very northern areas. We have this tundra or this wet peat in like a swampy area or an area where there's lots of moist vegetation where water uh, pools or is typically around, putting some of that wet vegetation inside the this sort of burlap cloth bag and then using that as your fire tool. I mean, even a this is talking, a gunny sack, but really, a cotton t-shirt would work the same way as this gunny sack, right? A wet cotton t-shirt that you could stuff with a little bit of vegetation or something to help keep it spread out like a pillowcase. That can be used. Keep it damp, drag it along the edge of the fire, use it to beat out the fire. So, get creative in what you might be able to use um, as a tool. I mean, even a fire blanket, right? A fire blanket could be useful deployed. The smaller ones that are just sort of big enough to cover an individual pot or something like that is a tool that you could use to maybe take that fire blanket and somehow attach that just to a long, piece of wood that you could drag it along the ground or something. Something to think about. And then another, we call it a specialty tool, right? Using the vegetation itself to put out the fire. If you've got, you know, uh, green palm fronds, any type of green vegetation that grows out in a branch or big, wide green leaves. Um, that you can use here. These guys are using it's a spruce tree. It's an evergreen tree with little needles. It's a type of like a pine tree. You're cutting off one of these spruce boughs and using that as the fire beater to drag. You can use it to sweep away vegetation. Um, so, and it's right there available right next to the fire line, right? So is there some type of vegetation right there nearby what's burning that you can cut off and use as a hand tool? General safety for the hand tools, make sure that they're not damaged. If there's something unsafe, take it out of service. When you take a tool out of service, though, get it fixed, get it repaired, or get it replaced, get it back into service. When you're working, uh, you know, you want to form up in a line with these hand tools. As many guys as you've got, whether that's firefighters or civilians that are helping you out, you want to line those people up with a tool in their hands. And everybody does just a little bit, right? Does a little bit of work here. So, we're talking, you separate yourselves by about 3 meters. Um, Spaced between you so that you can swing these tools around and not hurt anybody. Um, Look for things that are hazards. Um, Here in the U.S., right, we've got a 20-man hand crew that are working. So we line everybody up in a straight line, evenly spaced apart. Everybody carries their hand tool at a balance point where it's nicely balanced in their hand. You're carrying it on the downhill side if you're hiking up hills and things like that. Um, because here, sometimes we're hiking quite a distance into a fire or something like that. Um, So just think about sort of your spacing and if you've got to walk somewhere with all these tools, how are you going to do it safely? Eye protection is important. Wear some kind of PPE. The PPE that you use for structure fires is not appropriate to wear for bush fires. You just need long sleeves, long pants of a natural fiber material that's not going to catch on fire, some boots to protect your feet, gloves to protect your hands, some sort of a hard hat would be great, some eye protection. As you're cutting things, watch the angle that you're swinging your tool so that if you hit a rock or something like that, it doesn't ricochet or bounce off of that rock and hit your leg or hit the guy beside you or something like that. As you're working in that group, if you're passing by to move to the head of the line or something, we call that bumping up or bumping by. Let people know, hey, coming behind you, so that you don't get hit with that tool that's being swung around. If you're exchanging tools, right, handle first. Make sure they've got a hold of the thing. Um, when you're using the not using the tools, lay it down somewhere that somebody doesn't step on it and the handle jumps up and hits them. Uh, just a lot of common sense stuff there. Be careful when you're using these hand tools, right? And a lot of you folks probably have some experience in agriculture and working as a group doing some agricultural activities, so you've got a real good idea of how to use these tools. When we sharpen these tools, sort of the general procedures for sharpening these tools, take a look at the way this guy is sitting there, sitting on the ground, crossing his legs over, and holding that handle underneath of one of his legs. Really steadies that tool and holds it in place for you to sharpen it. So take a look at that, sort of body positioning there. Um, we'd like you to have gloves on and eye protection when you're sharpening tools. Sharp tools they're safer and more efficient. Duller tools can bounce off of things. So be sure you're taking the time to keep everything nice and sharp. Um, Make sure when you're working, sharpening these things, there's nobody else around. Um, Use the right size file for the size of the tool that you're using. You guys know what type of tools are available there. So whether it's a file or a sharpening stone or just a regular stone that you can use that you find is gritty enough to sharpen that metal, that's great. Um, be careful when you're using that file. I'll hold my ruler. If you wrap your hand around that file and you're moving towards that sharp cutting edge, you can cut your hands. So we like to hold the file, back at the end, and then to put pressure on that file, use the palm of your hand flat, so that there's nothing that can get cut as you're filing on that sharp edge. Um, After you've sharpened your tool, right, be cautious, taking your thumb and running your thumb over the edge that you just sharpened to check it for sharpness. Be careful doing that you don't that can cut your thumb, right? So be careful what you're using or how you're testing it to see if you've got it sharp enough. And then finally, he mentions, the appropriate angle for each tool. How do you know what the appropriate angle is for that tool? You're just going to resharpen it on, whatever angle it came with. So unless you're um, unless you're making these tools on your own, they're going to come with a beveled edge. Just maintain that same edge angle each time that you resharpen it. Hand tool storage. How are you going to store these things? Um, it would be great if there was some sort of a mounting bracket in the vehicles that would clamp that tool in place. If that's not possible, be cautious if you've got tools, sharpened tools in the cab of your engine or whatever, that they're secured so they're not sliding around with you while you're transporting them. Um, Try to protect the edges with some sort of tape or some sort of cover that either came with it or that you can improvise and make on your own. Um, if you've got a variety of these tools and you take them out to the fire, make a staging area where you can put those tools where people can go and grab them and go out and work on the fire. So general storage, right? Take care of them. Treat them as if they were your own, right? We're getting close to our time here. We're going to wrap things up with just a quick thought on locally improvised tools, right? If you're looking to increase equipment capacity, we need more fire tools. We don't have the right tools for bushfire. You got to use those locally available resources. What are those locally available resources, right? Well, so we'll go back through it. We talked about cutting tools. So you've got a variety of different, whatever you're going to call it, some sort of large cutting knife, a machete, whatever name you may have for this blade, right? A long blade that's sharpened with a handle on it. Great for cutting vegetation. Um, Axes that are locally available, handmade axes. Here's an example that I found. A handmade cutting axe. So what do you have available there that you can buy? Agricultural tools. There's all sorts of different shapes to those. You see these things in the markets everywhere that you go. Um, this, here's a sharpened, sort of grubbing, cutting hoe head that you can get. Um, I've seen these in markets in Nairobi. They're not. Last one I saw one of these for like 600 shillings. Um, in a market, and that was at a shopping mall that was probably quite a bit more expensive than you can find in the market. Um, so I know these tools were around. You can buy the metal tool head and carve your own handle for it. Um, so they're inexpensive. It's not sold as a fire tool, but you can find them in the hardware shops and things like that. Again, this rake style here, I've seen these locally available, right? Um, Over here, you've got a handmade rake that is just using, some sticks and some rope or something. How creative can you get, with your rakes? And then the broom. These are everywhere. Everybody's got these brooms, right? They're great for taking vegetation, loose leaves and things off the surface. So, you know, start thinking about some of these things as, hey, we can use this as a fire tool as well. Of course, you got to be careful with that broom, right? That you're not catching it on fire. Um, the smothering tools. Here's a homemade fire beater. Um, that some of the folks made in Malawi. It's a piece of fire hose that's cut open and nailed onto like an axe handle. You can use it for smothering. You're using it sort of like this fire swatter here. So using that fire hose to make a handheld tool that they've found to be somewhat effective. You could tell they've been using it, right? And then this swatting tool, right? How do we make one of these tools? Well, here's some things. Um, a mud flap, an old mud flap off of a big truck, right? Or a rubber floor mat, like a welcome mat. Um, Pretty easy to find. Of course, there's some sort of wood handles, easy to find, right? Most of your stations, um, you guys have these binding tools that you use to attach to reattach your hose couplings with. Some of that binding wire that you use to for those hose couplings. So we got this floor mat or this mud flap. We got our wood handle. We got some of this binding wire. Okay, we'll take that handle, drill some holes, drill a couple holes down through the center of that handle at the end. Okay, we're drilling holes through the wooden handle. Then we're going to poke or drill some holes in that rubber floor mat or in that truck inner or that truck mud flap, right? So holes, uh, you know, about the same width as the wooden handle. So we've got holes through the wooden handle. We've punched or drilled holes um, through the rubber mat. Okay. Now we're going to take that binding wire and we're going to feed that binding wire through the holes in the mat, around the handle, through the holes in the mat, down through the hole that we drilled in the wooden handle, back around the outside of the handle through the holes a couple times, back down through the wooden handle, back around the outside of the handle a few times, back through the center of the wooden handle, twist the wire off, wrap it around, and all of a sudden, bam, we've got our fire swatter. We made it in the station out of a rubber floor mat and a stick or something, right? Easy to do. Get creative. Think about how you can make these tools. Uh, what other ideas do you have? What other ways can you improvise some kind of a tool? Buy a tool at the local market, whatever. Okay. That's today's class, the formal portion. Look at my timing. We're right at the top of the hour. Uh, so I'm going to wrap up the formal portion of our training. Um, the big thank you to you guys. Thanks for sticking around and joining us here for today's training. If you scan that QR code, that'll take you to that folder where you'll find this presentation, some of that other stuff. There's my email address. Reach out to me if you need anything. I'm always available for you. Let me stop that sharing and thank you guys. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for sticking around. We don't take for granted the fact that you're using your own bundles and things like that to come and do this. Looking at a lot of the you guys on camera, I could tell some of you aren't at the fire station, right? You're doing this from your own homes, things like that. Love it. Appreciate it. I've got plenty of seats here. Um, we're averaging about 100, little over 100 people per training. I got seats for 300. Invite more people, please. If you've got other people watching on your camera, drop me an email. And I think we'll wrap things up. Stick around. We're going to take questions and answers and head into tea time now. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.